Good afternoon, and welcome to the Dr. Kennedy Podcast. The Dr. Kennedy Podcast is sponsored by the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investment and Development. That's the Daniels Foundation for Impact and Development. And folks, I want to welcome you this afternoon to sunny Florida. You can see this afternoon we're doing the podcast outside, and it's just a beautiful day out here. And again, we have a treat for you again today, as usual. Uh, Today we are with Bill Brandon. Bill and I, we connected up at graduate school up in Connecticut and had a great time. And he's a UConn Husky and basketball player, so he knows a lot about sports and things like that. So we'll talk to Bill about that. Uh, Bill is currently residing in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He's a graduate of University of Connecticut, MBA in 1984, BS in Business in 1979. He's a founder of Aries Financial Corporation in 1986. And he also was the director of investments to Chicago for Travelers, and he oversaw about $1.2 billion of the portfolio. He's a real estate investment banker. He's an investment underwriter for the group of the Midwest in Connecticut, and he's worked commercial banks in the mid-1980s and 1990s. And also he's a secondary educator in mathematics, adjunct instructor at public and private Connecticut institutions. So Bill's just a great guy. He knows a lot about essentially business, and we want to pick his brain on investments, what he thinks about Black Lives Matters, and he's really a grassroots guy connected with helping youth in Connecticut. So he has some thoughts on what we should be doing with our youth and where we need to meet them on a common ground so we can have some positive Black male images, which is one goal of this project here, is to have some positive Black male images, and Mr. Bill Brandon fits that in every respect. So, folks, thank you for listening today. And on the other side, we'll have Bill Brandon, UConn Husky, a good friend of mine, and we'll talk about a lot of different subjects. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the other side with Bill Brandon. Okay, folks, we're back on the other side. And again, this is the Dr. Kennedy Podcast. And the Dr. Kennedy Podcast is sponsored by the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investment and Development. That's the Daniels Foundation for Impact Investments and Development. And you can find out more on the foundation at daniels-foundation.org. So, folks, I'm so glad here. We have a real treat here today. We have Mr. William Brandon. Bill, how you doing? How's it going?
Ken, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing wonderful, Bill. And I already did your introduction for the folks that know a little bit about you. You're born in Danville, and I went through our little connection through Connecticut. And, basically, we just want to have fun here. So we're going to jump right into the interview here. And, just basically ask you a few questions and, tell the folks what's on your mind. So if you could start, maybe just give an idea of your formal training, some of your early life experiences and how that shaped you as a young man.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you. And I hope that someone will benefit from this. First of all, folks, we have to give the honor to God, because without him, we wouldn't be here today to have this opportunity. I certainly hope that this is beneficial, hopefully inspirational in some capacity to someone. We give thanks. God bless all. And here we go. I wanted to specifically, and I'm glad you did this, Ken, to say that I was born in Danville, Virginia. A little known piece of history is that Danville, Virginia is the last Confederate capital of these United States.
Really?
Okay. That seems to be a little more significant at this point in time, I think, without going on and on. But the way I summarize it is that we hear about the Confederate mentality and attitude in places like Alabama and Mississippi. You want to see a real Confederate museum, you better go to Danville, okay? Because that's where it is. So that's a general overlay of where I come up from.
Right.
There's all this stuff that we hear about walking on this side of the street or not being here after dark. No, that wasn't talked about. It was lived. And I'm sure in a lot of other places in a similar fashion. But in Danville, even as in the early 60s and mid 60s, which is before we came north, it was just a matter of fact, Jack. Okay, so that's important to understand, that there is a foundation of my background that comes strictly out of that. My father, who's my greatest influence, decided that even though he didn't have an opportunity for an education, that education was the difference. He marched with the King people down in Alabama in Jackson. Okay, so he brought that impetus and that fever with him, and he was bound and determined to put it on his children.
Okay.
And he did, sometimes in a very strong way. we all know.
Right.
But you know what? He got your attention, and he got mine. So that's kind of a real scoop of the background. I came here to Connecticut, and I guess one of the easiest things to give you an idea of the impact of coming north was not just the difference of being Black and seeing white, but going into a bathroom for the first time. You know, father said, "Oh, you can go to the bathroom over there," and walking out and saying, "Where?" Did we lose you?
Yeah, your video. You're back. You're back now. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
He walked in with me and said, "Right over there," and I was looking at this thing like it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. So that tells you again where I came from. You know, simple running water, simple electricity was not available.
Really?
To
Wow.
me as a child.
That's
Came
fascinating.
north. So a lot of times I'm just really a country boy from the backwoods, and that never really left me in terms of even how I live today. I'm out here living in Bridgeport, Connecticut now, and since the pandemic sort of fell on us pretty hard last summer, I'm out making a garden, man, real garden, tomatoes, beans, this and that. And these Northerners here are looking at me like, we see you for years and years and years walking back in here, been here 25 years in this spot, walking in here, suit and tie.
Yeah,
and now we see you out here with your hands dirty every morning, and they're laughing, but they also didn't turn down the tomatoes and the green beans that I gave them.
Yeah.
So again, I'm just a country boy. Yeah, I'm just a country boy. And so, I often tell people, don't let the shirt and tie, which I'm not wearing today, don't let it fool you.
Right.
Okay. That's really my father's legacy, and a promise to him and a dream to him. And I don't want to leave out my brothers and sisters. Two of them also went on to be well educated, two of the five. And we talk about, about my dad and my mom. Just quickly, no lady like her. All of us love our moms. But let me give you a short, quick story.
Yeah, good.
My mom worked for 2.5 years. Now, everybody knows their mother is pretty. My mom was a pretty lady.
Oh yeah.
She did not cash her. I didn't get any of it. You can see that. But she didn't cash a check for 2.5 years. My old man worked 2 jobs. He saved a check. My mom saved the check. He gave the money to her. Okay, we talk about longevity and the craziness of divorce statistics. She never bought a dress, never bought a pair of shoes for herself. She worked as a seamstress in American Fabrics, and she made clothes for us. Now, we weren't the most stylish kids, but there was no wind blowing in the back of our pockets, okay? so there you go. That's my people. And the bottom line is that shaped me. That I want to stop there as the background part. We can get to something else. But that basically is the shape and the crucible of who I am.
Wow, that's fascinating, Bill. You mentioned the Confederacy, and I don't want to sidetrack too much, but you just educated me because I was in Richmond, Virginia, which was quote unquote the capital of the Confederacy. But you're telling me that there's an alternative to that, which is in Danville. That's still because the main of it is in Danville, you say?
Yep. The last Confederate capital. The boys in Richmond were running south. Okay.
Right.
South.
Got you.
The bottom line on that is that if you own a towel or any kind of cotton cloth of any kind, look at the label. It's going to say Dan River Mills or associate or affiliate of Dan River, company of. That mill is still there today.
Right, got you.
Okay?
You just
so before the Civil War,
you said the last Confederacy. You said the last, so now you gave education. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay.
And Richmond still is. If you want to get the records of your lineage as a Black person who passed through Danville or who passed through Virginia, you still have to go to Richmond to get an accurate record of who you are.
Right. That's right.
Point in fact.
Library, Virginia.
My original birth certificate has a misspelling on it.
Really?
And I got it from Richmond. It took 2 years to correct it, but what I learned in the process was them folks kept some unbelievable records, almost like the Germans did. I mean, unbelievable. I said, this ain't my name. You can imagine the paperwork, man, but it got done. But that's the point, and that was the lesson. Everything in life is a lesson.
That's the library, the State Library of Virginia, I'm sure.
It whatever it is, it's more than that in some. I can't tell you.
Okay, give me some homework to do. So let's keep going. So that's thank you for sharing that, because I always tell folks that we have this north to south lineage, and you gave a very interesting illustration of how that's important and how it shaped you. So appreciate that. So tell us a little about your high school years. You mentioned when we were off record, you were talking about how you were a young basketball phenom, and you told an interesting story that you might want to share about one of your early teachers there. So let's talk about what kind of student were you? Were you a good student? Were you a quiet guy? What kind of guy were you as a young scholar?
Well,
people don't know you're a scholar, but I know that. So
the bottom line is the big picture is Bridgeport and Stratford and Fairfield County was really a hotbed for basketball players.
Yeah,
it really was. And there were some cats who came out of here. Walter Luckett, first guy to ever appear, a high school player, first to ever appear on Sports Illustrated cover.
Right.
Frank Olenek, who played for Bill Russell out in Seattle. And the quote was this: Bill Russell was asked, "How good is Frank Olenek?" And Russell said, now he was coaching at the University of Seattle. Only Frank Olenek knows how good Frank Olenek is. First round draft choice, player, university games, outstanding player, on and on and on. And that's just a couple of guys. And like anybody like yourself in New Jersey, you could take this list and go on for days and days. I was following those guys and walking on paved roads because those guys walked on gravel.
Right.
And the best quote that I have is this, and it comes from a great mathematician. He was asked a question, and he said, his response was, "If I can see further, it's because I stood on the shoulders of giants." And for me, a little guy who looked up and worshiped these cats, nowhere could I compare to those guys. But anyway, that's the inspiration. In high school, in grade school, I was developing a little reputation. In fact, for a minute there, I was known as a king of a particular court. If you came to that court, there would be people come to my house and say, "So-and-so is up here." I don't care what I was doing. I dropped it, sneakers on, having time getting them on as I was getting there, and we was about to find out something. Okay. But anyway,
let's get specific. So what part of Bridgeport did you live in? Were you in Bridgeport? Were you in Stratford, or where did you actually live?
My folks settled in Stratford, right, not too far from the Bridgeport-Stratford line. So I was washing back and forth, because that's what ballers were. It was Wesley Matthews.
Right. Gotcha.
So the bottom line was, I thought I was, washing back and forth to play ball, but like any young man, that was just another bevy of quail that was available.
Fresh meat, right? Fresh meat for you.
I was by-counting before it was a word. But anyway.
So what kind of student were you? Let's get into it. We're gonna come back to the basketball stuff. What kind of student were you? Young. I'm talking about elementary school. Where did your imagination for knowledge really seeking that you knew that you had something there in terms of your knowledge base?
Like most kids, when you're 8, 9, 10, you're trying to find your way. You know what's going on. But I have a story, and I started to relate it to you. Now I'll give you a quick piece of it again. When I was in 7th grade, man, I was developing this little reputation, somebody who could play, had a little game, had a little funky part of it. And, I had this English teacher, man, her name was Miss Marcella. I'll never forget her. She was 5'3" if she was 5 foot, okay? And she gave a book report on John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. And she wanted the book report. She called, the time came to hand in the book report. She called everybody, drop it on my desk as you're leaving. And see, I wasn't so smart. I waited to be the last one and was going to walk out, which was, now I look back, was kind of not a too smart a move. But she said, well, where's your report? As I got my back to her, which, you know, and I turned around and said, I don't have it. She said, how come you're not going to hand it in? I don't have it. Where is it? Why didn't you do that? I didn't want to do it. Tough. She looked at me, man. She didn't even get upset. She said, you will never play ball in this town again. And I told you this, Ken, I've been scared kind of twice in my life. Okay. She was the first one.
Right.
She said, well, now I'm going to give you a break, give you this book report on this other book, John Steinbeck, called The Pearl. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I was a little shook up. So I went home and read the book, you know, and it was captivating, man. I read it over the weekend, did the report. It was a captivating story about a young man who was giving up his life, diving for this rare black pearl. He was going to change his family's fortune with it. And basically, if you're diving for pearls, you're diving anywhere, you know, without an oxygen tank, you're just filling your body with, you know, carbons that can kill you. Carbon monoxide basically build up. Uh-huh. But he was doing it. I was captivated by the story, and the general framework was that this was in Pearl Island. I read the book, man, and I remember mouthing to myself, I'm going to go here one day. Well, it took 40 years. It never left me. Not knowing that the Pearl Island wasn't in the Philippines, but Samal Island had a pseudonym. Sorry about that. Had a secondary name called Pearl Island as just a reference. So I'm off to the Philippines, man. You know, after 40 some odd years, and you know, families raised, and you know, I don't mind sharing, you know, divorce and all that other crazy stuff, life stuff.
Yeah.
And I got there, and man, I got off the plane, and it really felt a lot like Danville. You know, hot, not humid, but you could see, even coming from the airport, that there was, you know, significant poverty, significant schisms between poverty on one corner, you know, wealth on another, but quite a modern city, Davao City. In fact, if you were to go there, even the 15, 18 years ago that I went, you would like say, this doesn't look any different than any other kind of US city. All of them are there. Obviously, all the agricultural people are there, Dole, Texaco, you know, you name it, you see it. And of course, there is the Japanese and Chinese and Asian influencer companies, Dowei, you know, Toyota, they're all there. So it's a prosperous place, but there's significant poverty. Anyway, fast forward the story. This gentleman walks up to me at the airport. He don't know me from Adam. I don't know him from Yao Ming, but he's of Asian persuasion. And I'm not being rude or impolite. I'm an American here, and Americans have a pretty lousy reputation when they travel abroad, because I've seen some arrogance that just isn't deserved. But the small event is that he wanted to invite me to his club. I said, well, I didn't bring my golf clubs. I was trying to back out. He says, well, you know, you come to my club, we'll have lunch or we'll have a dinner. I said, well, you know, I'm trying to back out again. He says, look, come to my office. He gives me a card. Come to find out, he's a board of trustee member of one of the most prestigious nursing colleges in all of, not just Davao City, all of Asia. Reference on Davao City, largest land area city in all of Asia and the South Pacific. So that'll tell you something. Largest land area, more than 2.8 hectares of land. So big place. So I go to his office, we have a quick conversation. His wife shows up, and he asked me a very point blank question. What do you want to do here? I don't think we had that conversation in my head at any time, because we've only met once prior. Right. But he's being curious. And I said, well, you know, I see the disparity in wealth here, and I wonder what it costs, you know, for somebody to, what's an education cost? At this time, I'm teaching as an adjunct professor. So, you know, education cost is something, you know, important. He says, well, let me introduce you to some people. Well, he introduced me, I thought he was going to introduce me to some dignitaries. He introduced me to some families on the ground. He took me around. Saw this little girl, maybe 2 or 3 families. Saw this little girl, man, she's 7 years old at the time. big old round eyes, clearly coming up in a impoverished condition. She looked at me, I looked at her, I was like, okay, I've seen this kind of look before, because as a teacher in both secondary and in in post-secondary, you develop some sort of sense of, who's got a certain desire, who's got some ability. And I wasn't wrong about this little girl. So 4 or 5 days before I'm ready to leave, I meet with this Dr. Do. And he tells me, well, what do you think? I said, well, what about that little girl over there in that particular barangay, which is a little like, the word barangay is a little like, not quite ghetto, one step up from that. And he said, well, we'll go back there, we'll introduce you. And so we had another conversation. I said, well, how much does it cost for this little girl to go to school? He gave me a number. And Ken, as I told you before, I lose track of that much money in my coin jar. Or as a friend of mine once said, I lose that amount of money on beer money spilled on the floor. So we set it up. And I thought, well, it might be for a year or 2 years, get her through grade school, not looking to back out like I was trying to do with Dr. Do at the airport. It turned out to be all of her education every year, right on through college. It's one of, yeah, man, it's one of the greatest things that I can say gives, I didn't say that I've ever done, greatest feelings I've ever had when she graduated and she sent me a picture. I didn't really adopt her, man. She adopted me. And you can imagine over 15, 14 years, what kind of bond would develop with somebody. So every year I would go back for vacation, spend my vacation, and make sure she was straight for the next year. Long story short on her, she's a prosperous banker today.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. Wow.
Man, and you know what? I love her like you couldn't believe it. And my children have a relationship with her like it just, only God could make that happen. Okay, so not me. So a really beautiful story.
Wow, and she got the following your footsteps going into banking. You're an investment banker, but
yeah,
we have to.
You see the big smile.
Yeah, I see. She follows big Papa. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
And I have two children, son, daughter, 33, 30. They're doing well. They're living their life.
That's a fantastic story. That's unbelievable. So let's kind of go into your let's jump into some where I met you. Let's go into some UCONN graduate school. UCONN. You did your did your BA at UConn. Then you went and got your master's, correct?
Yep.
And so so during that time, that's kind of what I ran into you doing your master's, things like that. So let's get into some. I want to start to broach some of this, Black Lives Matters, and back during that time, I don't know if we kind of know, but we were kind of being a graduate student and being a Black American graduate student. You were one. You were a few. We were a few of us. It wasn't many of us.
Yeah.
So
I think the number at that time was less than 100.
Yeah. So we're talking early 1980s, late 70s. You and I kind of, and I'm going for my PhD. I know I'm the only one. I figure you probably only won a lot of your classes because you said there's 100 of us. So, what can we talk to some other, Black graduate students that may be going through a similar experience? What were some ways that you managed, being the only one, or maybe not being as confident as you may be being around folks of your similar ilk? You get my question. So what can we tell young guys about going to graduate school, aspiring to do more, and eventually it usually tends to be that way. You're going to be the only one. How do we navigate that? What can we tell them some stories of to help them?
Well, the bottom line is that when you are a few or one, in my case, I did 2 years of graduate school, and I could count the number of Black men who were on that campus for 2 years, all in classes. Now, I did learn later that there were others who were in the system, but they were at remote satellite campuses. And that's where the less than 100, which is more amazing, that's where the less than 100 came from. So you can't help but stand out and stick out
Right.
And you can, that is a unique and advantageable distinction,
It's an advantage.
because it gives you, it really is, it gives you the chance to excel beyond mediocrity, because you can feel the pressure of the beliefs that unfortunately are ingrained in this society, that A, you don't belong here, and B, you gonna flame out like a bad Roman candle. Okay, not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. So it should be and can be inspiration and motivation for you to reach and excel.
Motivation.
And it got,
it's a
yep,
motivator.
it got to a point where even a couple of professors came to me, and I was the first student, Black student, taken on by a professor as a graduate assistant in the School of Business.
The School of Business. Wow, that's
And,
wow, historical.
yeah, so
yeah, I guess I got that honor too in terms of in the economics department. I probably got something similar as the first.
Yeah, so you know that them eyes were on you when you were in the classroom and out of the classroom. Folks looking to say, see, you got in on a humble, or you really didn't belong here. I wasn't gonna let that happen. And when I started scooping up scholarship money and having to turn some of it back because I had too much, the financial aid people were saying, you ain't getting all of this.
Right.
Then folks started to stand up.
Right.
And a lot of the students would come to me and say, can you help me understand this? And at that point, you get to change lives at a very important crossroads for them.
And perceptions. So let's talk about some of these perceptions. I got another question that's kind of tangential. So if you're familiar with the work of W.B. Du Bois, he talked about this idea of double consciousness, that as Black people, we are one of the only groups that have to see ourselves through two eyes, actually have two perceptions of ourselves. Now, he was talking about during slavery times that as a slave, you had to view yourself through the eyes of your master, because that's who controlled you, and also your own identity, and this whole idea of double consciousness. And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is that, we had to view ourselves as being, pioneers, that we had to say, well, we have to worry about what people think about, and also our own individual characteristics and traits. So what's your feeling about, is that a burden, or is that a motivator? Is this a motivational factor, these perceptions, this double consciousness? And then I want to go into this idea of sevens, because I think you're a seventh son. You're so gifted. But
oh, thank you. I'm honored.
By the way, in this interview, you're now, I forgot to say at the beginning that you're now on the Daniels Wall of Excellence. That is now what I named this podcast series. So hopefully down the line I'll be able to get out a little plaque or a little certificate, and so you'll be getting something here for me. But what do you think about these concepts I'm talking about?
Well, two things. First of all, I'm honored. Second of all, I'm delighted because I'm able to talk to a good friend and somebody I have tremendous respect for, because I couldn't imagine going through the PhD program on that campus as a Black man. I used to say to myself quietly, I can't do that, because I know what you were up against. I know.
Incredible odds, yeah.
So the bottom line is, Du Bois was correct. We live, as Black people in general, we live looks like we live in two worlds as Black people.
Right.
And we have to constantly be, even today, and nothing's really changed in that regard. And Irish people would say, and nothing against Irish people, they would say, well, we live in two worlds too as immigrants. No, you don't. The only people who come close to having to understand that they live in two worlds and are under two microscopes are the Jewish people.
Right.
And the reality is, those folks are our brothers.
Right.
They really are. From, if you do the lineage from Shem, all the way through to Abraham, where them folks come from. And if you look at Moses, Moses was in the house of the Pharaoh. So he had to look like them. Okay. Right. So, and that's us. Okay. So the bottom line is we live in two worlds. As a Black man, you might live in 2.5 worlds.
Right.
I'm not sure about that, but I suspect because the number of variables in our equation to navigate to decency, success, and to excel in just everyday living, man, it's